What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the show, Under Center with Abelson, presented by the Real Spiel Podcast. Wow, what a crazy week 7 we had. Um, this was by far, I think, the best weekend of college football that we had. It had everything. It had the top end games. It had so much depth, so many games across the country, so many storylines, the fallout, so many crazy fallouts from this weekend. So we have a lot to get into. So I do not want to waste any time. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, share. As always, we are here a couple times a week talking all things college football. So yeah, with that being said, let's get into the show. First and foremost, I do just want to get into the picks that we had for the weekend. We went on a little heater this weekend. We had a great bounce back weekend. We went 5-2 on our picks. Really wanted to go 6-1. Really did, but Michigan and Oklahoma they put up some stinkers. But I will take 5-2 every single day of the week. We hit on we hit on Missouri plus 3.5. We hit on Indiana plus 7.5. I don't know why anybody else would have been on anything else except Indiana to cover the spread. That was literally free, but we'll get into that. We fell on Oklahoma. We had Oklahoma plus 1.5. We had Texas A&M minus 7.5. We were right about Georgia minus 3.5. And we were right about Ohio State minus 14.5. That was one of my best plays for the weekend. Again, we'll get into it, but I just did not think Indiana really had a chance to make it super competitive. And again, we were wrong about Oklahoma and we were wrong about Michigan. But again, 5-2, that brings us to 21-23 on the year. During the preseason, I said my goal was to be at or above 500. So we're slowly creeping up on that. We got a bunch of games this weekend coming up. Great weekend of college football. Got some little rivalries, but we will get into a preview show later this week. All this show is about is everything about week 7. So, yep, 5-2, hot. Let's keep it rolling. All right, let's get into this recap. I guess we will start with we'll start with Bama and Missouri. I had Missouri minus 3.5. Even though they lost, I felt like they were going to be competitive in this game. I just did not think this was a spot where Alabama was just going to come in and roll over Missouri. They've played. This would have been their third. This was their third straight SEC ranked matchup, and that's just for any team. I don't care how good you are. These aren't the days where you just have so much talent that it doesn't matter. For any team, that's going to be tough. Alabama's obviously going to get up for this game. They're not going to take Missouri as some light opponent, but that's just going to be tough to just. They haven't blown out any of these teams, And Alabama's a good team, but with this schedule, I don't think this is a schedule where they're just going to absolutely blow out teams. But they got the win. That's all that matters. Let's just talk about Missouri first, and then we'll get into Alabama. This was a show me game for Missouri. I thought, Missouri hasn't had the toughest schedule. I know they've beaten South Carolina, and then they beat Kansas. Those are two good wins, but they haven't really had that game that makes you say, oh, Missouri's legit, Missouri's for real. And this was going to be that game. This was a real show me game. And I don't think they played as well. Again, the final score was 3 points, so they stayed in it. They had chances to win, but they didn't play as well as I thought they would. Bo Pribula, he kind of struggled a little bit. I think he only threw for 170, 80 yards. He threw for 2 interceptions. Both of his interceptions were not good interceptions at all. They both came on the same type of plays where he just either mistimed, where him and the wide receiver just weren't on the same path. Early in the game, the receiver, I think, just ran a straight shot down the middle, and he threw it to the out like the receiver was supposed to run an out route, or vice versa. He threw it down the middle when the receiver ran an out route. It was one of those things where he threw it where he thought the receiver was going to go, but the receiver ran a completely different route. And that was the same interception that he had on their final drive. They did a great job to score, to put it within 3. Alabama got the ball back, and they burned the timeouts. They got the stop, and they got the ball back with about a minute left, no timeouts or anything. And again, he threw just an interception where the receiver was, I think, just running straight and supposed to maybe turn and find his own, and he threw it to, I guess, where he thought the receiver was going to go, and the receiver ran a completely different route. So I don't know who you want to put that on. I guess, I want to say it's on the quarterback, because even if I don't know. It's a tough position because they just seemed like they weren't on the same page. But again, and he had a fumble. He had 3 turnovers. He had a fumble. I can't remember if I think he had 2 fumbles. One fumble that Alabama recovered on, and then one fumble that his player fell back on. Ahmad Hardy had a fumble. I mean, this is the best running back in the country. I thought he would have ran a little better. In my preview, I talked about how Ahmad Hardy would have to, just the running game in general, I think would have to help a lot to open up the passing game. And you saw that. I'm trying to pull up the stats. To see what Ahmad Hardy ran for. But it didn't. It felt like they needed the run game to open up the passing game. Yeah, I mean, they didn't. They weren't terrible on the ground, but I mean, Bo Pabula was your leading rusher. He had 61 rushes. Ahmad Hardy only had 52. Jamal Roberts, he had 50 yards. So you got 100 yards combined from the backs. And again, Ahmad Hardy, I think he was averaging well over 100 yards per game. He's the leading. I think he's the leading rusher in the country. And you saw that there were some points where the defensive backs of Alabama played extremely, extremely well. It almost felt like again, Bo Pabula went 16 for 28, 167 yards, only 6 yards per throw. And it felt like, during those times, like, Alabama's DBs were just not letting the receivers get open. Like, there was a big stretch where, like, it felt like no receivers had any catches. The leading receiver caught for 55 yards. Donovan, I think the true freshman, number 1. And a chunk of those yards were on the last, on Missouri's second to last drive where they scored to bring it within 3. He had like a 30-yard pass just on, his long was 27. He had a 27-yard gain on that final drive. So you take away like 2 long completions he had on that final drive, and he wouldn't have even caught for 30 yards. The receivers seem to have struggled. Kevin Coleman, number 3, I think he's their best receiver, and he only caught for 2 yards. He had 1 catch for 2 yards. I think that's where the game was kind of lost. The turnovers plus the fact that they really couldn't get anything going in the passing game with the receivers, and I think that is a product of them not being able to run the ball effectively. And that was my biggest concern for Alabama coming into this game, because Alabama has not been the best at defending the run all year. We saw them struggle against Georgia. Georgia ran all over them. Obviously, Florida State ran all over them. And again, they haven't been the best at defending the run. So being Mizzou, I think Mizzou is a top 10 rushing team in the country. I thought they'd have a lot of success on the ground against Alabama. And credit to Alabama. They came in, they locked up on the defensive end. And they ran the ball pretty effectively, I think, until Jam Miller got hurt. Jam Miller ran for 85 yards, and he got hurt, early in the 4th, that concussion or whatever he had. So he would have definitely ran for well over 100 yards. They were running the ball pretty effectively, and that was another surprise, because Missouri, I think, was the second or first best run defense in the country. So I thought, again, that's why Missouri would have a little more success. I thought they'd be able to stop the ground game for Alabama. But they couldn't. Jam Miller, again, until he got hurt, he was having a lot of success on the ground, ran for 85 yards. I think that's why, that's where the game was lost for Missouri. That, to go along with the turnovers. Even if they don't turn the ball over the 2 or 3 times they did, I'd like to think they'd be in a great position to have won that game, because they were in a good position to win it with the turnovers. But it's weird because Alabama didn't play a bad game. This felt like, the way Alabama was playing, it felt like a game they should have been almost dominating, but for some reason Missouri was just staying in it. Ty Simpson had another great game, went 23 for 31, 3 for 200 yards, 3 touchdowns. Their second to last drive, that was that was peak right there. That was a great drive from Ty Simpson because it was a 3 point game at this time, and I think it was a three. Yeah, it was a 3 point game at this time. Alabama's obviously trying to ice the clock. If they score again, they go up by 2 possessions. They in Missouri, credit to Missouri, they did a great job. They forced Alabama to a third in like 24, and I thought they were surely going to get to stop and get the ball back with a chance to win the game because they ended up scoring on their next possession. So if they would have got that stop and then scored, they would have very well won the game. But credit to Ty Simpson, he got a good completion on that 3rd and 24 to bring it to 4th and 8, and a gutsy throw on 4th and 8. I mean, that was just an incredible throw. I think he threw it like over the shoulder to a guy running like an outpost or something, and incredible throw. And then again, Missouri got another stop on the goal line. They were on the 5-yard line. Missouri got them down to 4th and goal on like the 5-yard line. And again, if they would have got that stop, they would have had a great chance to go down and take the lead. And what happened? Ty Simpson, they dialed up a great play. It was like I think like the tight end like blocked for a second, and then at the last moment, I can't remember exactly the play, but it was a great play. The tight end or the receiver or something popped loose right on the flat, and Ty Simpson dumped it down to him. So that was incredible play calling. That was gutsy efforts by Alabama. This was a tough spot again. They were on their 3rd straight SEC game, and two of them being on the road, and they showed up. Missouri is a good team. I still think, I thought going into this game they're a very underrated team, and again, they didn't do really anything to sway my opinions of Missouri too far. I'll show you guys my updated top 25. They didn't fall too far because they played a great game, a couple turnovers here and there. They could have very well won the game. But yeah, great job at Alabama. And it's kind of funny. We'll vaguely touch on Florida State. I guess we can right now. Florida State, they lost to Pittsburgh. It's so crazy to see how those 2 seasons went. Everybody thought Florida State, after they won the game and then they kind of blew out the next couple nobodies they played, that they were a team that was going to be on the up and up. And then Alabama, everybody was coming for Kalen DeBoer's head. They thought, it was done. They thought their season was over, and those 2 teams have just gone in complete opposite directions since that week 1 game. Alabama is looking better and better every week, and Florida State has been looking, worse and worse over these last few weeks. They're 3-3. Alabama's 5-1. So great job by that coaching staff to not start panicking. That's the thing with this new age of college football. 1 loss doesn't determine your season. I know I'm a BCS era guy. I wish we could go back to that, and I'm definitely a 4-team playoff guy. But it does make for all the exciting games when late into the season teams are still alive. So many teams are still alive. So 1 game doesn't ruin your season. And I think the coaching staff for Alabama did a great job keeping everybody engaged, not letting everybody overreact, fixing the things they needed to fix. And Alabama, man, they're looking great, man. They are looking great. Next up, we will talk about Ohio State and Illinois. This was a game we were right about. We picked Ohio State. I liked Ohio State. I think the early line on this one was Ohio State minus 16.5. It ended up, when I recorded my preview, dropping down to 14.5. I think it opened at 15.5. It dropped down to 14.5 when I picked, and I think when the game snapped, it ended at 16.5. I liked all of it. 16.5, 17.5. Let's see what they ended up. It was 34-16. So they ended up winning by 18, but I liked it as high as 16.5. I just did not think Illinois is a good team. The ranking may be a little overrated in the ranking. I think they're more of what we saw versus Illinois than what they were versus Indiana than what they were versus USC. They're not as bad as they were against Indiana, but I don't think they're as good as they were against USC. And again, I just really didn't think this was a game that, I thought they could be competitive and still lose by double-digit points, and that's kind of what happened. Ohio State's defense is just insane. Like, I don't know any other words, any other adjectives to use to describe it. I mean, it's it's wild. Like, like every time, because Illinois did a pretty great job of moving the chains. They did a pretty good job of moving the chains, getting into scoring range. The couple times I mean, they scored. I think this was the first time Ohio State had let up a red zone touchdown all year. And it was so funny because, like, you could just see how great Ohio State's goal line defense, red zone defense is. Because the couple times Illinois would get down there, it just felt like there was no way they were going to score. And on one of the times they scored, they had to pull out that trick. Not even like a trick play, but that double option play where he pitched it and then the running back pitched it again. Because it just seems like every time a team gets down there that they just have to do everything in their power to just get those couple yards to score a touchdown. Is insane how good that Ohio State defense is. Illinois, Illinois was getting into great position, but I will say there is the one concern, and again, this is a concern that I don't think it's going to bite them until they play a really good team, and we'll get into Indiana. That Indiana game might be Indiana versus Ohio State. I don't think they play in the regular season, but it looks like they're on a collision course to meet up in the Big 12 or the Big 10 championship. But yeah, because Ohio State, they just play so conservative, man. I don't know if it's because the defense is just so good or if it's because they don't trust Julian Sain fooling. But, like, they just play so conservative, man. I don't get it. I guess when you have that great of a defense, you can. I understood against Texas. You know, those are two good defenses. Texas's offense wasn't looking good. It was the very first game for Julian Sain. You don't want him to be in a position against a defense like that that's controlling the game to be in a position to do too much. You know, you don't want Julian Sain to lose the game. But, like, man, like, he threw for 166 yards, 2 touchdowns, like, and they weren't even running the ball that great, you know. They only ran for 106 yards, but Bo Jackson ran for 47, Donaldson ran for 44. Like, Jeremiah Smith caught for 42 yards, Carnell Tate caught for 41, Claire caught for 38. So, like, offensively, they didn't really have that great of a game. They just weren't letting. I just don't understand why they haven't just been letting Julian Sain rip it loose. Again, I guess it's because they don't need to. You know, their defense has been dominating. They won 34-16. They gave up 3 points against Minnesota, 6 points against Washington, 7 points against Texas, 9 points against Ohio. Like, I guess that's why they don't need to, but in my preview, I lightly touched on this. I said that might be a problem for concern when you play a great team with an explosive offense. They haven't played an explosive offense yet, and I think that's going to hurt them. And they're not going to play an explosive offense for the rest of the year. They play Wisconsin, Penn State. That game just became an easy game. They play Purdue, UCLA, Rutgers, and then Michigan. They don't have a single other explosive offense on the schedule for the rest of the year. So I think that might come back to bite them on the butt when they play potentially Indiana in the Big Ten championship game. Indiana, they can be explosive on the offensive end. They can be explosive. So, and when you get in the playoffs, you don't know who you're going to be matched up against. You might play Alabama. You might play Miami. You might play, a plethora of teams that have good offenses. And when you do, is Julian Sain going to be able to go bang for bang? Is he going to be able to trade leads? Because yeah, your defense is good, but I mean, is your defense going to be able to do this against the top teams in the country? I don't know. If they are, then yeah, you can continue to play this conservative style. If not, then you're going to have to let Julian Sain rip loose. And you'd rather him have that experience in the regular season against some of these teams rather than in a shootout when he's never been there before. But again, that's a great problem to have. Everybody's been saying Ohio State, they've just been so boring to watch, and that's true. But when you're the coach, you don't care about how the game looks. You just want to win. You want to win. That's all you want to care. That's all the W is all that matters. They're 6-0 or 5-0 or whatever. The win and loss is all that matter. The style points when you're the number one team in the country with a dominant defense doesn't really matter. So yeah, Ohio State looking as impressive and as boring as ever. Not really much more to talk about on this one. So let's go on to the next. The Red River Shootout, Oklahoma versus Texas. This was a game we were unfortunately wrong about. I thought Oklahoma was going to come in and kind of be able to dominate Texas, at least on the defensive end. I thought this was a game where Texas or Oklahoma's defense, because they've been so dominant. Their pass rush has been insane. They have the most sacks in the country. They sacked Jackson Arnold 10 times. I thought no matter who the quarterback was, I thought this would be a more competitive game strictly just because of their defense. Because Texas coming into this game wasn't it's not a shock to anybody. It is a surprise, but they haven't been playing well. The offensive line has been absolutely horrible. Florida has a good defense, but I don't think anywhere near Oklahoma. Florida was able to sack Arch Manning 6 times. They got pressure on him almost every single time. The offensive line hasn't been great. Texas's running game hasn't been great. But credit to Texas, man. I was nervous. I was a little nervous about this one because in the back of my mind, I just knew that for whatever reason, Texas was just going to come out and look like a completely different team. I don't know why. I had no confidence in betting them. That's why I picked Oklahoma as well. But there was just something in the back of my mind saying Texas is just going to look like a different team. And that they did, man. That they did. John Mateer obviously played in this game. On the first opening drive, he looked pretty good because I think they went down the field on their opening drive and scored a field goal. He was getting the ball out. He looked good. He was running the ball. And then from there, it just kind of all went downhill. And give credit to Texas's defense. I don't want to take anything away from them. That defensive line was absolutely insane. I think he got sacked. I think John Mateer got sacked 5 times. But yeah, I don't want to take anything away from Texas's play, but it did seem like maybe that hand was bothering Mateer just a little bit because he threw some of the passes he was throwing was just on a couple slants he threw. The ball placement was just always either behind or low or a little too high. He threw 3 interceptions, and all of them were really his fault because I think his first interception he threw, it was on a slant route that got tipped, but the ball was behind the receiver, so the receiver had to adjust, and he couldn't catch it. I think the ball got tipped, and Texas intercepted it. But yeah, he just didn't. Again, I don't know if it was the hand, because it was weird, because that opening drive was his best drive of the whole entire game, basically. He threw for 28 for 38, 200 yards, no touchdowns, 3 interceptions. And the rushing of, that's one thing I did talk about in my preview, is if there was a weak point of Oklahoma, it's the run game, and it was just as abysmal this game. Texas really, not even really exposed, because we knew coming into this game that Oklahoma has really been really one-dimensional all year. They just don't have a running game. Jaden Ott, the transfer from Cal, who was supposed to be great, he ran for 2 yards. They only ran for 48 yards as a team. Their leading runner ran for 33 yards, and then nobody else ran for over double-digit yards. And when your quarterback has a hurt hand and might not be 100%, you can't. You got to be able to run the ball. But give credit to Texas's defensive line. Like I said, they were just dominating. They were dominating in the run game. They sacked John Mateer, 5 times. They were getting pressure on him. And that Oklahoma offensive line looked terrible, man. It did not look good. John Mateer was running for his life damn near the whole entire, at least in the second half. He was running for his life that whole entire second half. But yeah, give credit to Texas. Arch Manning, it's crazy. It is crazy what happens and what you can do when you have a running game. Isn't it just absolutely insane? When you have a decent running game and your offensive line can protect you, oh wow, Arch Manning actually looks like a competent quarterback. He actually looks like a good quarterback. And this is me being a little sarcastic to all the Arch Manning haters because, again, I understand he hasn't been playing good. There's some things he could be doing a lot better. but the team around him has not been good either up until this point. His offensive line against Florida was abysmal. He had no time to throw, and even against Florida, he played pretty good. And the run game, they've had no run game. You thought with bringing C.J. Baxter and Trey Wisner back that they'd be able to run the ball all year, and they haven't. The offensive line has been bad. And again, by all means, Arch Manning didn't have a great, knock it out of the park game. But going into the season, I thought if Arch Manning could just be average, if he could just be what because Quinn Ewers was slightly above average, but he wasn't great, and they still made it to back-to-back, Final Fours. I thought if Arch Manning could just be average, that Texas would be good. But I didn't think the team around him would be average as well. I didn't think all of Texas would be average. I thought all of Texas would be great, and Arch Manning would be average, but this whole year everybody's been average, and they finally started getting some help. The receivers started playing well. I mean, he was spreading it across the board. I mean, DeAndre Moore, we haven't really heard his name all year. We've been hearing a lot about Trey Wingo, but he caught for 50. Trey Wingo caught for 35. Wisner 34. Livingston for 30. So, again, nothing extremely crazy, but just enough to go complement it with a good defense to be able to dominate this game. And their defense was by far the story of this game. Their defense dominated in all aspects and all phases, and their offense was just good enough. And then you get a little bit of help from the special teams with a punt return touchdown. You get some interceptions. And if Texas plays like this the rest of the way, they will be fine. If they play dominant defensively, they don't turn the ball over, Arch Manning plays okay, and they can run the ball, they will be all right. Because, look, Trey Wisner, he ran for 94 yards. Some big runs. Arch Manning ran for 34. And, yeah, I mean, they were just playing hard. They were playing – you just really didn't see this from Texas at all this year. So credit to Sark for getting his team going. And I think he used all the talks from the previous week to motivate his team. Because they came out and they looked like a completely different team than we've seen all year. And again, they weren't out on the defensive end, they were great, but offensively they weren't great. They weren't special, but they were good enough. And Arch Manning wasn't bad to cause his team any harm. He wasn't turning the ball over. I think this is his first game all year where he didn't have a turnover or interception. He was getting the ball out on time, on target, moving the chains. And that's all you really need, man. That's all you really need. So, yeah, shout out to Texas, man. Great win. Oklahoma, they got exposed a little bit, man. They got exposed. I'm not going to, be dramatic and say they're done for, but that schedule coming up for Oklahoma is difficult, man. They have a difficult schedule. And obviously, I don't think they were going to go undefeated at all, but, they play South Carolina, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Alabama, Missouri, and LSU. So, tough schedule, tough loss, but I think Oklahoma's definitely still a good team. They just have some things they need to fix with the run game. But yeah, great win for Texas. Indiana versus Oregon. This was a game I'm very happy to be right about. I did like Indiana to cover. I was slightly leaning Oregon, so I'm not gonna be like, oh, I was confident in Indiana to make it close and competitive. I was slightly leaning Oregon to win. But I thought Indiana to cover was one of the best plays of the weekend. I think it opened at 8.5 and it dropped to like 7, 6.5, and I still liked it at that. Indiana is a good team, and I hope this weekend made people realize how good of a team they are. They are not the same team that we saw last year at all. I think it's safe to say that they are marginally improved from last year. Because even last year, obviously they ran through a weak schedule. When they played good teams, when they played Ohio State, you felt like they weren't going to win. When you played Notre Dame, it felt like they weren't going to be competitive, and they weren't. But this year, in my preseason, I talked about how they're going to be a much more improved team. Fernando Mendoza is a huge upgrade from Curtis Rourke, and Curtis Rourke was a good quarterback. But Fernando Mendoza, I thought, was by far a better quarterback, and maybe a lot of people didn't really know about him because he went to Cal. But Cal had a good year last year. They had a good, solid year last year for Cal standards. And Coach Cignetti, man, I talked about all in the offseason, in the preseason, I talked about that in the preview, how he's just a winner, man. He is a good coach. And we'll touch on it later, but if you're Indiana, you better do everything in your power to keep him. Give that man whatever money he wants because he's earned it. And, I'm hearing some stuff about Penn State trying to go after Signetti. Ugh. I'm not always for leaving one, especially if you're in the SEC. Like Lane Kiffin leaving Ole Miss for Florida. Like I don't really see it. Like you're leaving one good SEC situation for a bad SEC situation. Indiana may be a little different because Penn State has dramatically more resources than Indiana, and he's still having success at Indiana. But I mean, Penn State's just a completely different level of job than Indiana. And in the current situation in the last few years, I don't think like for Florida, like Ole Miss for Florida and Lane Kiffin, I don't think Florida is by. Obviously, Florida is obviously they have the history. I do think they have more resources, but I don't think that they are marginally more better than Ole Miss in terms of resources and stuff. Because if so, wouldn't Florida be better? Like, wouldn't they just be better? And they haven't really been great over the last 10 years. Like, they've had good years. Don't get me wrong. They've had good years, but they haven't really been, like, a great team. But nonetheless, we're talking about Indiana and Oregon. Indiana, man, this game, I think, was the defense. I think their defense is the story of this game. They went in and kind of just pushed around Oregon, man, which was surprising because Oregon has been a team this year who has been great. Their defense has been great. Their offensive line has been insane, especially when you think of how they're a transfer port. All their offensive line is basically transfers. They only had one returning offensive lineman, and Dante Moore has only been sacked a single time this year. In this game alone, he got sacked 5 times, and he's only thrown 1 interception this year. This game alone, he threw for 2. That's one thing I was super impressed with Dante Moore about coming into this game is for a young guy, he's played with so much poise. He hasn't been sped up. He hasn't been, pressured a lot. And Indiana just came in and they got to him. They pressured him. They sped him up. And he looked a little flustered. He looked a little rattled out there. But, they did a good job staying in this game. It was 13-10 at halftime. And even late in that fourth quarter when Mendoza threw that pick 6, I thought, I'm not going to lie. Because Indiana, they were up, I want to say a touchdown at that point. And it looked like they were driving down the field to score again, and it looked like all the momentum was with Indiana. It looked like they were going to pull away with that game. Then you throw that that was a terrible pick 6. The receiver ran an out route, and he just underthrew it. You cannot underthrow an out route like that because all the receiver has to get is get under it, and all the cornerback has to do is get under it like he did, and boom, to the house. Especially on those out routes, there's nobody on that side, and the offensive linemen are not going to catch up to him, and that's exactly what happened. And I thought that was going to be a game changer. I thought that was going to be the difference. But credit to Indiana, they stayed in it, they bounced back, they went back and scored again, and from that point on, they kind of just took over the game, ended up winning 30-10 or 30-20. But yeah, the story for this game for me was Indiana's defense. They were just absolutely insane. They got to Oregon in a way that we really haven't seen a lot of teams be able to get to Oregon in this year. They pressured Dante Moore in a way that we really haven't seen any team really pressure him. Fernando Mendoza, he played a pretty good game outside of that turnover, threw for 200 yards, a touchdown. They were able to run the ball a little bit, they didn't have great success on the run game, but they were able to run the ball a little bit. Himby ran for 70 yards. The receivers played pretty well. Surratt, he caught for 121 yards. Cooper, he caught for 58. But yeah, I think the story of this game for Indiana was their defense. Coach Signetti gets Indiana's first ever win against a top 10 team. Oregon loses their first top 10 team home game ever, which that's a crazy stat in itself. To never lose a top 10 home game is kind of wild because that environment at Austin that's a top 5 environment in the country. And it's crazy because that stadium only fits 55,000, and it's one of the loudest arenas or stadiums in the country. But yeah, Indiana, they definitely are going to jump in my ranking. I think they are by far the 3rd best team in the country. They have 2 impressive wins, a dominant win against Illinois. A great, great win against Oregon. Good job to Indiana. Next up, we got the Deep South's oldest rivalry, Georgia versus Auburn. Um, this was a interesting game, man. This game was crazy. First and foremost, I want to talk about. I'm starting to see a problem with Auburn or with Georgia. They are starting a lot of these games terribly. Like I'm starting to notice it. Against Alabama last year, they gave up 28 points. They were down 28-0 against Alabama. Against Texas last year, against Texas, I think they were down double digits early against Texas. They came back and ended up winning that game. What else? Against Notre Dame, they went down early against Notre Dame. Against Tennessee this year, they went down 14-0, 21-7. Against Alabama, they went down 14-0. Against Auburn, they go down 10-0. Like, I don't know what it is, and it's so weird because Kirby is a guy who always gets his team ready. He always gets his team ready to play, but for whatever reason, they have these slow starts that are constantly having to play from behind. And credit to them. That shows the resilience of that team. No matter the lead, no matter the score, you always feel like Georgia is going to come back, and that's a testament to their coaching staff and to the coach. But, I mean, wouldn't it be nice to start out a game up 10-0, to start out a game up 14-0, and not have to constantly come from behind? So that's definitely going to be something interesting to continue to look at going, into the later into the season, because it's going to come back to bite you. It's going to bite you, and it bit them against Alabama when you just have these slow starts. But again, Auburn dominated that game in the first half. It looked like they just were dominating. Georgia was just not playing well. They couldn't get going anything on the offense, and Auburn took a 10-0 lead, and that's kind of where everything changed. With a couple minutes left in the second quarter, Auburn drives down the field, gets the ball on the 1 yard line. Jackson Arnold jumps over the goal line, and ball gets punched out, fumble, and I think it was a fumble. I personally think it was a fumble. It was so close, though, but it looked like the ball was coming loose before it got punched out. Everybody's talking about how the ball got punched out after the goal line. It looked like it did get punched out after it broke the plane, but before he even got to the plane, in my opinion, based off the replays that I saw, that ball was coming loose. He jumped over, it was coming loose, it slipped in his hand, and then it looked like the Georgia player punched it out. It was bang though. They called it a fumble on the field. So I think, I'm not mad that it stayed a fumble. If they would have called it a touchdown on the field, I would not have been mad if they made it a touchdown. It was that close that I think whatever the call on the field was is the call that probably should have stood. But nonetheless, yeah, that was. And from then on, and then to make matters even worse, you have just the complete meltdown from some of this. I'm not gonna lie. Auburn got shafted by the refs. They got shafted by the refs, man. But that final drive wasn't on the refs. That fumble call, you could have blamed on the ref, but it was such a bang. They reviewed it. So it was such a bang call that I'm not mad they didn't get that one. But then Georgia starts the ball on the 1 to 2 yard line, and then you get 3 penalties in the drive to set them up for a field goal, and 2 boneheaded penalties. You had that first the ball that catch got reviewed. It ended up being a catch, they called it. But then you get a targeting. So you give him 15 yards. And then I'm pretty sure on the very next play or the next play or two, you get a personal foul, late hit, roughing the passer. So you get a targeting, then you get a personal foul, roughing the passer, and then you get an offsides to set up Georgia to get a field goal. So you go from supposed to being up 17-10 or 17-0 to 10-3 at half. From that moment, I was literally saying probably after the roughing the passer, I said Auburn's not going to win this game. They're not going to win this game because that's just stuff that happens that completely shifts the momentum. And I knew from that moment, I was literally saying to myself, Auburn is not going to win the game. But yeah, I felt for Auburn. I really, really felt for Auburn, man. And then late in the fourth quarter, that Kirby timeout situation, that was. I'm a Georgia guy. I like Georgia. I'm not a Georgia fan, but I root for Georgia. But that was embarrassing, dude. Are you serious? You really let Kirby Smart gaslight? That's a bad look for the refs. Because if people don't know what we're talking about, Kirby Smart was clearly calling for a timeout. He was running up the sideline, clearly calling for a timeout. They stopped the game and issued a timeout to Georgia, but Kirby Smart was saying that he was clapping, like he was trying to clap at his team to get the ball snapped, to get the ball going, and he tricked the refs into thinking that he was actually clapping. When on the replay, you clearly saw he was running and calling a timeout. You saw he was going like this, running up the sideline, going like this, and the refs he talked the refs into thinking he was clapping, but who claps like you don't clap like that? You clap like this, like you don't clap like that. And in the replay, he was clearly going like that. And it was funny because when Hugh Freeze, he was ripping into the refs, and he was literally pointing at the jumbotron like, look, he's literally calling a timeout, and the refs aren't even paying any mind. The fans are booing. If there was a game where the fans I would have been okay with the fans throwing stuff on the field, it would have been this game because Auburn was just getting absolutely shafted. To go on top of the Oklahoma game where you had multiple terrible, terrible calls going on Auburn, the SEC literally had to issue a report saying these calls were wrong. You really have to feel for Auburn, man. But you had a whole second half, man. You were dominating the game. You still had a lot of game ahead of you. You had a whole second half to continue doing everything, and they just couldn't. I'm pretty sure Auburn had like 50 yards of total offense in that second half. Georgia started to get things going with the run game. Gunnar Stockton was playing pretty well, and they just do what Georgia does and find ways to win these games, and they found a way to win this game. A great gutty win in a tough environment. Auburn, when there is a big game, that's a tough place to play, man. That is a tough place to play, and they were playing well, man. They were playing well. I just don't think Jackson Arnold's it, man. I've been on record to talk about how he is just not a good quarterback. And this game is a perfect example. In that second half, they just could not get anything going. So great win for Georgia to move to 5-1, 6-1. Tough loss if you're an Auburn fan. I think that puts them to 0-3, 0-4 in SEC play. Tough loss, man. All right, got a couple more things before we get out of here. Next up, I think the biggest news of the college football season up to this point, James Franklin is out at Penn State. He was fired on Sunday after an embarrassing loss to Northwestern. I didn't even watch the game on Saturday because this wasn't a game I thought I would need to watch, and then I saw that they lost. So I was pissed because I did not want to have to go back and watch the whole entire game, but I did, and their defense just looked horrible. I didn't even think – this is a weird game because Drew Aller, outside of that first initial interception he had on the goal line, he didn't play that bad, and the run game was pretty good. Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen, they were running the ball pretty effectively. It felt like they were running for 6 yards a carry, but the defense of Penn State, and they both had muff punts, so that kind of balances it out. And Northwestern on the muff punt, they only got a field goal off the muff punt. Penn State scored a touchdown from their muff punt, or from Northwestern's muff punt, and Northwestern only got a field goal from Penn State's muff punt. But I didn't think Penn State offensively was playing terribly. Like, I didn't think they played good, but they didn't play terrible. Like, in my opinion, they didn't play terrible. Katron Allen ran for 90 yards. They were running the ball pretty effectively. But Northwestern just did a great job of staying in it. And obviously Drew Aller, it's insane to think 2 weeks ago, Penn State was the number 3 team in the country, and they were beating Oregon in overtime. They had a 7-point lead in overtime. All they had to do was get a stop in overtime, and they would have won that game. And from there, like you just find yourself saying it can't get any worse, and then it does for Penn State. They obviously go on to lose to UCLA, and then they go on to lose, and then you're like, oh, it can't get worse. And then they lose to Northwestern, or they're losing to Northwestern. You're like, oh, okay, it can't get any worse. Their quarterback is out for the year with a broken ankle or whatever he has, and then you're like, okay, it couldn't get any worse. And then they fire James Franklin. I'm this is this is a tough position because obviously James Franklin can't win the big games, but his thing has been winning the games he's supposed to win and losing the games he's supposed to lose to. So I get it. I get it. Once you start losing those games that you can't, that you're supposed to win, UCLA, Northwestern, I get it. I get it. I just didn't think it was going to come in the middle of the season. I thought James Franklin had built enough equity. I thought he's done enough with that program to earn the right to at least have one bad year. This is a guy who's won 9 or 10 games almost every single year. And I thought he earned enough with that program to at least have one bad season. But I get it, but I don't necessarily agree with it because I thought that, they were going to let, obviously the season kind of felt like it was going off the tracks after UCLA, but I thought they would at least let him get through this season and wash it up as a bad season and at least let him get one more chance. I thought next season that, even if this season continued how it was, they finished with 3-4 losses, blah, blah, blah. I thought they would at least give him the benefit of the doubt to get one more season, get one more chance next year. If they don't win a big game next year, if they struggle next year, then to let him go. But I just, even if they fired him at the end of the season, I thought that was okay. I just didn't think there was any way they would let him go, especially with that buyout, $49 to $56 million he's owed now. I didn't think they were going to do it in the middle of the season, so that was an absolute shock to me. It's just insane. I mean, Penn State was my national. Joel Klatt had his. It's funny because Joel Klatt's preseason pick was Clemson, and they kind of just went off the rails. My preseason pick was Penn State to win the national championship, and I mean, their season just went completely worse than Clemson. And I thought you couldn't really get worse from Clemson's standpoint, but man, that's tough, man. I get it, but this is one of those situations where you better hope you made the right decision. You better hope this was a Georgia Kirby Smart decision and not a Wisconsin decision or there's plenty of teams out there who, or a Florida decision. With Dan Mullen, where you fire a coach who's good, who wins games, who puts your team in positions to be successful. You fire him for a player or a coach who puts this, because that it could go one or two ways. It could be a Kirby Smart decision where you needed to fire him to get the next coach that elevates your program, or it could be a decision where you fire a coach who had your team at the baseline, a good team, at the very minimum, a good playoff contending team, and it could spiral into irrelevance where over the next 5 years you're looking at Penn State and you're like, oh wow, they won 5 games this year. Oh wow, they won 6 games this year. Oh wow, they only won 7 games this year. But there is a lot of great names. So I'm in Penn State, especially in this new era, they have plethora of resources. I mean, this is Penn State. I think it's a top 5, top 6, 7 job in the country. But they have to get the next coaching right. They have to get the next coach hiring right. There's a lot of good names out there. Matt Campbell. I've been hearing a lot from Matt Rule and Coach Cignetti. If you're Matt Rule, I don't know why you would leave. Nebraska that's a good job, and that's a historic program. They're going to supply you with all the resources you need, and they're having a good year. He's having a good year in year 3, so I don't know if I would leave Nebraska if I was Matt Rule. I've been hearing a lot about Coach Cignetti. That's pretty interesting because I'm not for coaches leaving good situations, especially if you're leaving like an ACC team or a Big 12 team or a Group of 5 team to go up into the SEC or the Big 10. I understand that, but I'm not really for coaches leaving a Big 10 job to go to another Big 10 job, especially when you're having success. And I mean, Indiana, Coach Cignetti, he has brought Indiana into relevance, man, and it feels like over these next couple years, Indiana is going to pile in the resources to continue doing it. But I wouldn't be mad if Cignetti left Indiana to go to Penn State. But it's going to be very, very interesting. It is going to be very interesting to see the way this goes. Yeah, but what a fall from grace. What a fall from glory Penn State has had, man. This is a team who 2 weeks ago thought people thought they were still going to be in the playoffs at the very worst in the playoffs. And 2 weeks later, they've fired their coach. The quarterback's done for the year. And it seems like they may not win a game for the rest of the year. But tough. All right, one last thing I want to get into. I want to get into my AP Top 25 before we get out of here. This has been a jam-packed show. We didn't really get to cover everything. There was a couple games we didn't get to talk about, Michigan, USC. So I might make a part 2 to talk about some of the stuff we missed. But I do want to get into my updated AP Top 25 before we get out of here. So let's just get into it. At my number 1 team, I still have Miami. I still think all around they are the best team in the country. I got Ohio State at number 2. I got Indiana. They jump up to number 3. I had Indiana at number 7 last week, so they jump up to number 3 with a great win against Oregon. I have Texas A&M jumping over Ole Miss. I had Ole Miss at 4 last week. I have Texas A&M at 4 this week. Ole Miss struggled with a Washington State team that they really shouldn't have struggled against. But they still got the win. That's all that matters, and they got the resume to kind of back it up. They do play Georgia this week, so that's going to be a pretty interesting game. Ole Miss at 5. Bama, they jump up to 6. Oregon, they drop down to 7. I had Oregon at number 3 last week. They're at 7 this week. Texas A&M or Texas Tech is at 8. They're just continuing to look dominant. Georgia, I have at 9. Tennessee, I have at 10. A lot of these teams, they're just a product of teams ahead of them losing. Because I really don't think LSU is the 11th best team in the country, but I have them at 11. Mizzou, I'm not gonna. I had them at. I had Mizzou at 11 last week. I'm not gonna drop them too much. They played a great game against Alabama, lost by 3, had a couple turnovers where if one turnover goes a different way, they could have very well won that game. So I have Mizzou at 12. I have Georgia Tech at 13. I dropped Oklahoma to 14. I had them, I think, at 6 last week. I said, if I told you, once John Mateer comes back, because I didn't want to really move Oklahoma until I saw them play without John Mateer, but they played Kent State, so that wasn't really a good sample size. But I said I would adjust accordingly. Next time we saw Oklahoma really play good competition, and they just got handled by Texas, so I dropped them down to 14. Vanderbilt is at 15. Virginia is at 16. USF is at 17. I mean, they just absolutely put it on North Texas, man. Dominated that game. BYU's at 18. Notre Dame's at 19 again. I know some people have Notre Dame higher, and Notre Dame has a chance this week. They play USC, which I think I just completely forgot to put USC in my ranking because they definitely should be back up. I think I completely just forgot to do that, though. But yeah, they play USC this week, so they have a chance to slide up. If they play well against USC, I'll put them up. But again, they have 2 losses. Again, those 2 losses are 2 great teams. But who have you beaten? Who have you beaten? I can't have you as a top 10 team in the country because you have great losses. Like, what are we doing? Great losses? Like, a loss is a loss. I don't care who you lost to. There are better losses than others, but I'm not having you as a top 10 team in the country when you lost your top 2 games that you've played and you've beaten nobody. And Notre Dame has beaten nobody. So, like, what do you want me to do? I can't put them higher. I just can't. They've beaten Boise State. They struggled with NC State. That game was close up until like the second half. They struggled with NC State. I mean, Arkansas is an okay win, but they fired their coach literally the day after. And then Purdue. So, like, I need to see more. And again, that's the problem. That's why I think they have a chance of being left out of the playoffs because Notre Dame's schedule, there's not a lot left. That Pitt game could be interesting. Pitt's, interesting team. But USC, they have to win. I mean, clearly they have to win this game. If they lose, they're not going to make the playoffs. So this is a must-win game for them. It's going to be very interesting. USC has a real chance to win that game. But yeah, let's keep it going. I have Notre Dame at 19, Memphis at 20, Nebraska at 21, Utah at 22, Arizona State this is probably where I should have put USC. Again, I just completely forgot, and this is probably where I would put USC. So we can put USC at 23. I just didn't want to drop Arizona State that much because they played a good Utah team without their starting quarterback. Like, if Sam Levitt is going to be out for an extended period of time, which I haven't seen a report saying what his injury even is. If he's going to be out for an extended period of time, then okay, like I'll probably, but I can't judge Arizona State in a loss when they don't even have their starting quarterback. So we'll determine, but this is probably where I should put should put USC. So we'll put USC at 23. We got Cincinnati at 24, and we got Texas at 25. Again, it's kind of the same thing with Texas and Notre Dame. Who have you beaten? Who? I will say though, Texas does have a great win. That's why they jumped back up in my ranking, but they shouldn't have even gotten. In my opinion, Texas shouldn't have even gotten a vote last week. They got 122 votes. I think they were technically ranked like 27th, but they shouldn't have even gotten a vote because up to that point, you were a 3-2 team with no Power 4 wins. That's not even worthy of a top 25 vote, in my opinion. You're 3-2. You looked terrible, and you don't even have a Power 4 win. So with that dominant win against, and again, I think the AP kind of agrees because the AP I thought personally the AP would have put him higher because they're Texas and the AP loves Texas, but they only jumped up to 21 after a top 6 win. So I have them at 25. I think that the win definitely deserves them to be ranked, but I can't put Texas higher. That's your first Power 4 win, and we're in week 7. We're in week 8. We're in week 8, and Texas just got their first Power 4 win of the season. Like, they don't deserve to be higher. But yeah, Florida State fell out of my ranking. That's a conversation for a different day. Florida State, they just don't look good. I don't know what's going on with them. People in Tallahassee are calling for Mike Norvell's job. So, but yeah, that's my top 25. This episode ran a little long. There was a lot to get into, and even with that, we didn't touch on everything we wanted to. Might make a part 2 and touch on the rest of the stuff from week 7. But yep, that's it. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, share. I appreciate you guys if you made it to the end. I appreciate you guys for listening. And we'll be back later this week with our preview. Might try to get another episode out as well. So thank you guys for listening.